Welcome everyone to Meaningful Interviews. I'm here today with Rabbi Meir Plotkin, who I met over the phone, I must say, not in person until today. And Rabbi Meir is known in the Lubavitch world, in the Chabad world, for himself and his work and his connection to the Rebbe and Chassidim, as well through his father-in-law, Rabbi Hendel, Olav Sholom, who was the chief rabbi of Montreal and tremendous Talmud Chacham. Many of my Rabbeim, my teachers in Yeshiva, Rabbi Bukit, Rabbi Ushpal, and Rabbi Garfinkel, Rabbi Tenenbaum, were part of Rabbi Hendel's group and friends, so I know about him. And Rabbi Galitsky, who I interviewed when he was probably about 90 and told me also. So Rabbi Plotkin is a son-in-law of Rabbi Hendel. And today we're going to talk a little bit about his background, his family, and his youth years growing up. And we'll go from there. So Rabbi Meir, I'd like to ask you to begin with your background, your parents, grandparents. Do they come from Galicia, from Hungary, from Russia, from Poland? And then tell us how you grew up and where you grew up and the culture, the environment in which you grew up, please.
Okay, I was born in Montreal, Canada. My parents, both of them came from Russia. They were born there. And of course, they left Russia like everybody left Russia in those years. My father came to Montreal in 1904, which is 118 years ago. He was 2 years old. And my mother came, she was already a teenager when she came from Russia. Then Ukraine and Russia was all one thing, not like today. And the reason why they came, because like there was pogroms and Jews were getting killed, literally. And the government was doing nothing. Not only that, they were instigated, they were happy with it. And there's a lot of, in Chabad, there's a lot of stories, and it's printed from the Rebbes, how the Rebbes in those times, going back 100 years, 150 years, how much they worked for the cloud, for the community, to stop all these murderous things. They would come in, the Kazakh would come into a shtetl, and literally they burned down the houses were all from wood, because in Russia there's a lot of wood and it's free. So they would make houses and they burnt it down and they stole whatever they wanted. And if people didn't like somebody, they just killed them. And there was nobody to go to. The police were happy. The government was also happy. It was an anti-Semitic government. So Jews got tired of it, because sooner or later, what's the use of raising a family when, God forbid, nothing's going to happen. So that's the reason why during the 20th century, the 1900s, starting in the late 1800s too, Jews started coming to North America, to all different kind of places. And one of them was to Montreal too, Canada. The main reason was that they can be able to live like Jews in safety. Yeah. That's the reason why they came to Montreal.
Now, were they from a Hasidic background, a Litvak background? Your parents?
Okay, and the background, they were not Hasidim. And my father says he doesn't remember, from Russia, he doesn't remember anything, but it happens to be that he came from a shtetl that the Alter Rebbe made the famous wedding in a shtetl called Zlobin. And that remained a Chassidic shtetl for hundreds of years. So the shtetl was known. My Zayda was not, what, as far as I know, I hardly even met him. That I don't think he was a Chassid. He probably came, if he lived in Zlobin, so surely he knew what Chabad is. But there was nothing in our family about Chabad. Same thing, my mother remembers, she wasn't young. She came from a shtetl that was called Yerushalayim after Ukraine, which is Kimmich, and she remembers the Rov. I don't know if she knew her personally, if she was a girl, how she knew her. But she remembers that a Lubavitch, who was a very famous Lubavitcher Chassid from the Rebbe Rashab, I think it was by the Marash too, was the Rav from Kimmachuk. And then there was the famous, with probably one of the richest and most powerful families in the whole Russia, the Guravi family. They had the largest tobacco factory in the whole Russia, and they were very powerful, and they were big, the whole family were big Chassidim for the Rashab. She remembers that they existed. If she had a contact with them, no. Basically, my family did not have any direct contact with Chabad. Now, a step further, and here is something that if you read the Sikhs of the Frierdiker Rebbe, what he spoke and what he wrote, and it's printed, how life was. He came to America in 1940, how it wasn't that time, especially if it was 20 years before, it didn't get better. But that's how it was. In a nutshell, the vast, vast majority of all the Jews who came from Russia, most of them came from Russia and Ukraine. There was some from Poland too, because Poland was also always a Roman Catholic country, and they were also very, very, very strongly anti-Semitic because they hated the Jews. Nothing to do with religion, they just hated Jews. So the problem was that coming to the United States, coming to North America, there was a 6-day working. In other words, there wasn't like today a weekend, which is Shabbos and Sunday. It was a 6-day, the day off was on Sunday. And you had to work on Sunday. Now, an immigrant coming from Europe, who literally, but English was not his language. They all spoke Yiddish, because nothing to do with religion. They spoke Yiddish because all the Jews spoke Yiddish. And of course, they had to speak the language of the country to speak to the non-Jews, either Polish or Russian. But English was not the language, and it was totally strange for them. And they needed the jobs, literally for livelihood. And in the wildest dreams, they couldn't think of working on Shabbos. It was unheard of. They never worked on Shabbos. Shabbos arbeitet. Shabbos, you don't work. And you heard there's a famous story. These stories are true. They worked, and then when it came in the wintertime, the short days, the Shabbos in Montreal, Shabbos begins, Lichtbenchen, at 4 o'clock, and there's about 2-3 Shabbosim, that it's about 5:10 to 4, it's already Lichtbenchen. So when it came 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they had to work till 6 o'clock, from 9 to 6, and they went to the boss and they said, I'm sorry, I have to leave now at 2 o'clock, because 2 o'clock is Shabbos, and the boss was a Jew, who Shabbos was something in Europe, not in North America. So he gave him a pink slip, paid him what he owed him, and told him not to come back next week. It's a famous story. It's not a fairy tale. That's how the Jews lived. And they kept on fighting and fighting, not to work on Shabbos, until eventually they had to work on Shabbos. This is the way I look at it. Somebody has a different interpretation. Gesund to hate. And I know for a fact, I remember when I was a kid, that there were minyanim for Shabbos, 7 o'clock in the morning. They finished at 9. They made kiddush in the shul. I knew what shul did it. Then there was a minyan for 9 o'clock for those who died for Shabbos. And then they went to work. I heard about people who had to keep, I don't say they had to, but anyway, they kept the store open. And they wouldn't answer the phone, and he was Mabas Sedra in his store, and he didn't do no malachas, but it was his store, and it belonged to him, and they were all working. He didn't want to work, so he sat in the office, I don't know what, which is, of course, I'm not going into halacha, that's the whole basic, doesn't have anything. The point that I'm bringing out is that Shabbos, when the Shulchan Aruch comes along, and it says in the Shulchan Aruch, which that's halacha l'maisa, that somebody's machal Shabbos, harehu ka'akum l'chol dover, is considered a non-Jew or goy, the Jews cannot accept that to work on Shabbos. They didn't want to work on Shabbos. They still kept a kosher kitchen. They wouldn't buy treif of flesh. Many of them even made kosher the meat themselves, because that's the way they always did it. Certain things they kept, but eventually they went away from Yiddishkeit. And that's the whole United States. Now, if you look in the United States, and you look at it 1900, 1910, and 1920, you won't find one yeshiva in the whole North America from wherever you go. Zero, not one. Then you'll find out that the famous yeshiva, which we'll soon get to, he also eventually was a Talmud there, Torah Vodaas, opened up in the 1920s. It wasn't like a yeshiva in what way it was in the 1950s and the 1960s. But there was no chinuch for the children. There was no sfiga for the children.
Why are you saying all this? Because I want to stay to the topic. Why are you saying this?
What? Excuse me?
Why are you telling me about Shabbos and all this? What was your point? Let's get back to the point.
My point was that once they had to work on Shabbos, then Yiddishkeit went away.
Right, but what does it have to do with your parents and your grandparents?
Well, then to a certain degree, when they got used to it, that led them, not they were so proud about it, because they remembered Shabbos. This is the first generations. But once they got working on Shabbos, so Yiddishkeit, to a certain degree, was, to a certain degree, but to a big degree, was eliminated.
So are you saying this happened to your, right, but are you saying this happened to your family?
It happened to everybody. They have to work on Shabbos. There was no Shomer Shabbos businesses open then. Maybe one or two. Oh, the fact it was a 6-day week. And when you hired something according to the law of the government, there's a 6-day week. That's dinner de machusa.
Okay, so how did that impact you as a child?
How did it affect me as a child? Now, I'm not so old, but in my times, let's say in the 1950s, I was a small kid, yeah. Montreal is not a small town. I don't know how many Jews there were there, but everybody knows Montreal always had approximately a Jewish population, but 100,000 Jews, okay? Yeah. And give or take it, that's what it was. There was 10,000 more, 10,000. That doesn't change the picture. Right. I knew every religious, not traditional. Let's call it Shomer Shabbos. Every Shomer Shabbos, real Shomer Shabbos family in Montreal, I knew every single boy and girl. You know why?
Because there were so few.
There were very few.
Right.
In the whole city.
Right.
And let me tell you exactly what I mean. This is going back before me. There was a chief rabbi in Montreal. I think I saw him once with a long white beard. I don't even remember him. Before my time. And he was a Rav, a European Rav. His son, Michal Shabbos B'Fahesier, delivered oil in oil trucks, Econ and Sons on Shabbos and Tuesday was the same thing. That was the son. In my times, there was a different, I don't want your name, names are not important. There was he passed away, they made another one, chief rabbi. He had a son, I remember him. He was a professor in college, Michal Shabbos B'Fahesier. I think that answers your question.
Okay, so
to be a Shomer Shabbos and Taka to not to do a Malach and Shabbos was very few in the whole city.
Okay, but what did
in other words, the children.
I understand.
The children were religious.
Okay, my question is, but you were a young boy in the 1940s, right? So were you Shomer Shabbos completely?
My house, I tell you to an extent. We'll go to my family. So let's talk about my family, okay? My father worked for himself. He had a successful business, a big business. It was a one-man show. There's nobody working for him. He used to sell new steel. In other words, there's a factory that makes, I don't know what, let's make hot water tanks or you need steel for steel is something that you need.
Right.
And builders, factories who are building things over there, we know there's steel. We're talking about new steel. We're not talking about junk. Junk is junk. Scrap.
Right.
No, we're not talking about scrap. Talking about new steel. And he had a tailor, make it short, and he had a trailer, not a closed trailer. Trailer wasn't good for him. And he had these lift-up machines, and he would take tons and tons of steel. It was a one-man show. He had maybe one or two going work with him. And they would put it onto this trailer, and he would deliver it to this factory, wherever it was.
Okay.
And Shabbos, 100%. 100%. That's when they get to his business. Shabbos, it doesn't matter when. If you want to hear stories, I think I'll tell you one story. My father was a quiet person, never spoke about himself. He wasn't a Torah scholar because there was no way to be a Torah scholar. There was no way to teach him. Okay. But I'll tell you one story. There was I was learning in Yeshiva in Lubavitch, in Montreal. I was in a late teenager. Let's say I was 18, 19, I don't know, something like that. And maybe a year younger, being older. I was learning very in the basement in the Zal of Montreal. I was the youngest one. We'll soon get to that eventually. And there was then a Lubavitcher man, a Chabad man, went into business, and he needed to buy, I think, his office supplies. And a business was closed up or went bankrupt, and it was being auctioned off. So he needed someone to go with him to the auction cell, and he wanted to buy office supplies. So he figured he didn't know who to ask. So he figured I should ask my father. So I told my father about it. I told him when the auction is. He says, impossible. He doesn't have a minute free that day. He can't go. Anyway, I pressured him. You have to realize that he's Meir from the Lubavitcher man that we lived together in Besmetish, and he's much older than me, got married, and he's opening up a business. Anyway, the kids, I told him, you have to do it. You have to put him on his feet. So the saying is, I hit him below the belt. He says, okay, I'll go. So he went there, and he knew the auctioneer. I didn't know about anything. He went over to him, he told me later. And he told him, listen to me. I'm going to bid for it. It's not for me. It's for someone. You have to help with this Jewish guy. He's going to business. He has no money. And when I make a bid, we make 1, 2, 3, sold. Sam. That was his English name. His Yiddish name was Shmuel. His English name was Sam. Anyway, so by the auction sale, I didn't know about anything. He also didn't know. So somebody wanted to bid for something. They're going to sell something, which even at $50, it's a steal. It costs hundreds of dollars. Nobody's bidding on it. So my father says, I don't know, $5, $10. So this auctioneer says, $10 over there. For $10, you buy maybe one of the doors over there. This is not a $10 item. $10. It's quiet. $10. 1, 2, 3, sold to Sam. This went on once and twice and 3 times. Anyway, a Jewish guy, later I found out he was Jewish. All of a sudden, and there was a lot of non-Jews there, mostly non-Jews. He got up over there and he opened the mouth. You're going ahead and you're selling stuff and you don't give time for anybody to buy. What's so special about Sam? Just because he came in here with a skull cap and his sons, he thought the other one was also a son, are with beards and black hats. And we don't know if we wore black hats then anyway. And they're so what? But I'm also a Jew. I'm not no less a Jew than he is. He's a Jew and I'm a Jew. Why are you so? And the auctioneer was also a Jew. Why are you so special for him? My father didn't say a word. He didn't move. It didn't affect him altogether. I looked at his Jew as if the guy's nuts, you know. It was quiet. All of a sudden, out of the clear blue sky, a French Canadian stands up and he says, "You're the biggest hypocrite in 2 feet." The non-Jew is telling the Jew. Can't answer a non-Jew. A Jew boy, he would answer, but not a non-Jew. You're a hypocrite. What do you mean you're a Jew? I don't work on Sunday because our religion tells us that Sunday is our Sabbath. and your Sabbath is Saturday. How do you keep your Sabbath? Yeah, you're open for business. Apparently, he knew this guy. Yeah, you open for business, by you Saturday and Monday and Tuesday, the same thing. Well, let me tell you a story about Sam. Okay, you have to realize this is, let's say, 1960, somewhere around there. He says, you remember there was a snowstorm in this certain day, it was on a Friday? Yeah. Anyway, all of a sudden, it gets about early afternoon, and Sam comes to my place, yeah, with a trailer, loaded up with steel, yeah, which is still is worth tens and tens of thousands of dollars. You have to realize, and I tell my kids, they should know what a dollar was in those years. I was a boch in Yeshiva, so what did I know? But I know that when we used to go to the kosher bakery for 10 cents, we got 3 cinnamon buns for 10 cents. That means each one was 3 cents. For 10 cents, you got 3 challah rolls, which cost about, I don't know, 50 or 75 cents. And there you got it for 3 cents. And here we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars when people work the whole week for about $20, $30. You're talking like probably today, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars open on a trailer, left over by a French Canadian. He says, I'm leaving the whole thing over because I'm not going to get to my place and then get home. And there was a snow. In Montreal then, we had snow, not like you have in New York. We had snow. I'm never going to make it. I have to be home before 4 o'clock, let's say. I'm leaving it by you. And he left it by me. I want to see you do that. You worked on in the Sabbath, and he was ready to go ahead and to trust a non-Jew. And I'm a Roman Catholic, and I'm proud of my religion. You're a fake through and through. It was so quiet there. I don't know. I was so quiet over there. And later I asked my father, who is this Jew over there who opened the mouth of you? Yeah, he says, Stamagonish. He was a nothing. My thing was a big millionaire, big thing. Stamagonish over there.
Right.
So
okay,
if you ask my question about how it was, our house was to an extent, I'll give you an example you should understand. Nothing to do with Lubavitch, nothing to do with Chabad. In the late 40s, somewhere around 1950, around there, a rabbi came to Montreal. He didn't have a minyan. He didn't have 2 cents to himself. He was a very special Jew. He davened with us in the yeshiva every day, Shabbos, because he didn't have his own minyan. He became famous as the Tosher Rebbe. The Tosher Rebbe's sister-in-law lived, we were neighbors. We lived upstairs. They lived downstairs. They just came. They were in Dortmund. I remember she was very sick. I was a kid. I was a small kid. I remember, but I wasn't a baby. And I remember my mother used to give me, he says, in Yiddish, we spoke in the house Yiddish. She said, take this soup, it was a hot bowl of soup, and bring it downstairs. And I remember one day I bought it down. My mother went with me. Then she says to this woman that really I would make you a fleischike. I would make you a meat soup, which is much more geschmack, more tasteful than this, but it has to do with meat. And I don't want to intrude upon you something like something else. Yeah. A week or two later, I remember I was a kid, maybe, I don't know, 10 years old, 8 years old, a small kid. Yeah. And I went into the house, and the Tosha, she says, I wanted to know that I spoke to my brother-in-law, the Tosha Rebbe, and Tosha Rebbe said, by Mrs. Plotkin, can there some flesh. By us in the house, there wasn't a Metzias. I never even saw such a thing, to go ahead and to buy a chicken for Shabbos without, okay, they took away off the feathers. We didn't take off the feathers. Yeah. My mother, she was busy the whole Thursday. I think she started on a Wednesday, preparing for Shabbos. She had to open up the chicken, and she taken all the kishkes over there. And then my grandmother lived in the house, and she was at Tzedekis. That's a nice number of the whole city. She never took it. She wouldn't put on a sheitel. She never took the tichel off her head. Never. And she never put on a hat. A tichel, you don't like it, lump it over there. So she had to open up the chicken. She opened it up. I remember I was a small kid, 10 years old, 8 years old. And she would say, Mama, give a kick. She would look at it. She just looked at it. So she said three things. Sigonish, it's nothing. She says, it's treif. You have to go to the Rav. She says, kosher. You have to go to a Rav. So my mother would take this piece, put it into a, I don't know, there was no plastic bags. I think she wrapped it around with newspaper. I don't remember. And she told me I had to schlep it to the Rav. The Rav happened to be a very choshev Rav and the biggest Rabbanim from Lubavitch. His name is Rabbi Shmuel Lew. I'm not going to go into him. I'll just tell you, he was a special person over there. And I had to walk. And I didn't feel it was cold. It was windy with big snow. Anyway, I wasn't so crazy about doing it, but I had to do it. Or else there won't be no chicken for Shabbos. Okay? And I would schlep it to him, and I would tell him, it was ready. We'd say, Meir, what's the Baba gesagt? What did your Baba say? So I would tell her what the Baba said. We took a look. She was always right. She was always right. She couldn't read Ivrit. She couldn't read from the Siddur. And she knew the Senorena, the whole Senorena by heart. Because I know they used to come at their house Shabbos in the afternoon. I was a small kid, maybe 6, 7 years old. I remember them saying Senorena, which most of the readers don't even know what it is. I'll leave it for Rabbi Dolphin to go and what Senorena is over there. And my bub would sit and listen, and she used to correct them. And yeah, they made a mistake, and she would correct them. She couldn't read, but it was a different thing over there. So okay, I was raised in a house that so Yiddish guy was 100%.
Right, I got it. Now, so you're raised in this very frum house with everything you said. What yeshiva did you go to from the age of 6 to 12? Lubavitch Yeshiva, the Montreal Lubavitch Yeshiva?
There was another yeshiva too, Lubavitch, and then there was yeshiva from the Lubavitcher, and I learned there. And I learned that was the only place. Before we go further, okay.
Until just what age?
What age? And when I was a kid, before Bar Mitzvah. After Bar Mitzvah, till 14. 14, I left town. I left Montreal. But let me tell you something. The yeshivas had no impact at me at all. Zero. The yeshivas didn't have any impact on my chaverim. I think before we go into yeshiva, who are my friends? Who did I play with?
Okay.
I didn't have friends. I couldn't have friends. Next door to me, where we lived, let's say I was a kid 5 years old. I didn't even go to school. I was a kid. Since I was raised, I don't know, 5 years old, 6 years old. My mother told me, I wasn't allowed. I played with him a whole day. I mean, when I wasn't in school, where I had a bicycle.
Yeah.
We weren't poor. My father was a businessman. Baruch Hashem, money was not lacking. Not that we spurred, not that we lived right. We lived like everybody else.
Right.
But if I wanted, I had a bicycle. Not everybody can have a bicycle. Some people even have food in their house. I had a bicycle, a three-wheeler, a little bicycle.
But the point you're making is that the point you're making is that your friends' homes were not kosher frum homes. That's the point you're making.
Right. And one point further, I had 3 friends.
Okay.
3 close friends and another 2, 3 not so close. And then all these houses were 100% frum, exactly like my house. But
wait, stop. Were you part of the, let's say, the Lubavitch community? They all got married.
No.
Why not?
But I knew everyone. I knew the boys. I knew the families. I knew everything. First of all, the Lubavitch community was tiny. Who's the Lubavitcher community? At that time, there was a handful of Lubavitcher people that were Chasidic. Don't forget, the Russians came in the 50s later. They didn't come in the 40s, the 50s. And the Russians how many Russians came? I'll tell you even more so. In the 60s, I was already, in 57, I was out of town already. I left Montreal. I never came back. No, it's not true. I came back, Lubavitcher. But that was later. Yeah, but how big was the whole Montreal family? 30, I don't remember. I was once, more than once, my Chabrusa Shmuel Lew, we once sat down, went to everyone, including those who went to Lubavitch, who became Lubavitcher, those who came from Vienna. We'll go there, maybe we'll get like a little bit more than 30 families. When I was a kid, there were 6 Lubavitcher families.
Okay, but 1 second, but there were other Frum families in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So why?
And I knew everyone. Take it easy, it weren't a lot. Take it easy, it weren't a lot. I'm talking about families that the kids were from.
Right.
I'm not asking about their father. They were yidden with beards.
I understand. I heard that.
With silk kapotas, and I told you there were chief rabbis that the kids were.
I know. I heard it. You don't have to repeat that. I got that. My question is like this. So why do you say that you weren't impacted, influenced by your yeshiva upbringing in Montreal if you went to a Frum Litvish yeshiva as a boy?
Yeah. So the only thing I got there was there was no hadrocha. They didn't have experience in being malamdim, and they didn't make us, we should daven better, we should become better kids, or I don't know what, influence us with anything. And yes, I learned. I don't say no. I learned Chumash, and then I learned Rashi and Mishnayos and all that things. And then started learning Gemara. Yeah, I started learning these things.
Okay.
But Hadrocha, I didn't become a Talmud Chacham. I had a good head. I went to had a good head. I didn't become a Talmud Chacham. Now I look into it. I didn't know about anything better. So that was it. But to say that they put me on my feet, no.
Okay. Now stop. Now, at what point did your father have a contact with the Shanghai Talmidim that came to Montreal?
A direct contact, and not really. He knew them. They kept to themselves.
Right. Okay.
If you're talking about Lubavitch, I think we should leave over the Lubavitcher, because the Lubavitcher at beginning didn't even have a proper school. Oh, they didn't even have a proper yeshiva, and they started only later to starting at the lower grades. They took college students in the afternoon. The Lubavitcher in the beginning was stam nothing. There's a whole story about it, but it's not good. I had to go into it.
Right.
My father knew about the Lubavitcher. They came to him, probably came for some money, which he gave them. He was willing to help them and everything. His shaykhs, the Yidden then had a shaykhs in the shul where they davened.
Uh-huh.
In other words, there was a shul. My father was a Russian. My father comes from White Russia, or we met before his Lubavitch. So right around the corner from us was a Nusachari shul. So he davened in the Nusachari shul. A few hundred feet away, there was Polische younger light who came from Chasidic backgrounds in Poland, and they took up the Bearden payers on the boat coming, and they called themselves Tzeire Das Vodaas, that we're from the youngsters, we're not from the old geezers of Montreal, we are going to remain Frum. And when the 9 came to Montreal, that's before my time, before I was even born in 1941, these Yidden took Montreal-born boys and gave them over to Bochum, who came from a Tvos, Varsha, with the Hochsidische garb, who couldn't speak a half a word of English. And that didn't exist at all in Montreal. They never even saw such a thing. Poland, yeah, but not in Montreal. And they gave it over. But they started yeshiva with a handful. When I mean a handful of children. And they built it up. And later, even later, so they took in kids from into the yeshiva in Lubavitch, I'm talking about. And they didn't press them for schar limit for tuition. And the kids were totally not religious, from a non-religious family, we mentioned before. And the families didn't have extra money. And the tuition was free. they could have gone to a different place, the Talmud Torah, where they had to pay tuition.
Okay, so stop for a second, please, Rabbi Plotkin, Meir. 1 second now. Okay, I got an answer to the question. I have another question. So your father knew the Lubavitchers. They asked him for funds. He helped them. He davened in Nusach HaRishul. But that didn't really have anything to do with you. It had nothing to do with you. So your exposure, answer my question, yes or no. Your exposure to Lubavitch and Chabad was not at 12 and not at 13 and not at 14. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay.
Right. I didn't have it there. I had friends, because the Lubavitcher kids over there. So
So now your father sends you, I guess, to Torah Vodaas in New York. And that was when, in 1957?
1957, the end of 56, 57, let's say 57,
okay.
Yes. Okay, now, if you want to go, now.
One sec. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to end the first segment of the interview, and then we're going to go into the second segment. So I want to thank you for so far providing for us, for our viewers, on Meaningful Interviews, a background to Reb Meir Plotkin. It was very informative to understand your childhood, your parents, where they came from. So we have now a perspective. So we will now end the first part and continue in a moment.